All right. Well, welcome. My name is Jennifer Morrell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Elections Group. I'm also a former local election official, and I'm really excited to be able to share an hour with all of you and our special guests talking about how we can use audit reports to boost awareness and trust. I know many of you have been on webinars with us before, but for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, the Elections Group partners with state and local election officials. We implement new programs to improve processes for voters and stakeholders. We provide guidance and resources and direct support, both for states and local jurisdictions. And our amazing team is made up of all former election officials and election experts from across the United States. We're excited to be able to share some of our newest resources, some templates and other aids and tools to help you in communicating your audits, specifically your post-election audit reports. But I am really, really excited that we also get to introduce you to a couple of special guests today who are going to be sharing some of their work in doing the same, in sharing information around audits of their elections. So before we jump into the PowerPoint, I want to do a couple of introductions. I'm going to let both Courtney Phillips, she's from the South Carolina State Board of Elections. She's the audit director. And Brian McKenzie, he's clerk from Davis County, Utah. And we'll start with you, Courtney. I just want to let the audience know when I first got acquainted with you, I literally wanted to jump out of my seat because it's not often that you're in a conference where you hear somebody stand up and say, I want to talk about elections. And also, by the way, I have a background and expertise in auditing. I've come to really value that tremendously. So, Courtney, would love to hear a little bit more about you and your background and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Courtney Phillips again, and I'm with the South Carolina State Election Commission. I've been the director of audit for about 2 years. So elections is still very new to me, and I'm learning a lot every day. But prior to that, I was a legislative auditor for 10 years. And so that's really where I got my background as an auditor, learning how to, fairly look at something, analyze it and evaluate it, and make suggestions and recommendations for improvements.
That's awesome. Thanks, Courtney. We're just really excited to have you. Brian, I have the pleasure of knowing you both as a former colleague of sorts. We both served in counties, neighboring counties in Utah during my time there, but also as a good friend. And I think your story, your sort of career trajectory through elections is so unique. Just thrilled to have you with us. One thing I'll just share with the audience, I remember, and I know this is true today because I hear this about Brian in his office, was always looking for ways to improve the work that he did and his team did. And it's so amazing to see him now leading this team and continuing this ever evolving, like, how do we do it better? How do we make this more secure, more accurate, but also create a process that's inviting for voters? So Brian, tell us a little more about yourself and the work you do.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I'm currently the clerk of Davis County, Utah. It's the third largest in population in the state, right around 200,000 active registered voters, just to give you an idea of how big we are. My history in getting involved in elections is kind of a fun one. I never, like most of us as local election officials, I don't think we ever thought that we'd grow up and become an election administrator. But I kind of fell into it and found a passion for administering elections. I've been working in elections since really 2006, and have just loved it. I've gone from just the lowest level on the totem pole, and worked my way up, learning and understanding things, everything from being our equipment specialist to our warehouse manager to our election manager to now county clerk. And so I've really found a passion for it. I think this is a great topic that we're going to be discussing with audits. As a local election official, I don't always like audits. It's one of those additional duties as assigned, right? But I think we'll have a great discussion on what we can learn from them and what we can gain from the audits that are sometimes imposed on us and others that we impose on ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And recognizing you're also preparing for an election. So thank you so much for taking time. Just before I get started, a little background information about our audit project and audits generally. While today we're going to focus mainly on the conversation around audit reporting, I'd really encourage everybody, if you're interested in learning more about principles and standards and best practices surrounding audits, to review our Exploring Election Audit series and the webinars that we've done on those. I think you'll see some links in the chat here shortly if you want to take a look at that. But now I'm going to share my screen in just a second. Let me just preface one more thing. When we did this work on exploring audits and we met with election officials and we started to think about various ways that we could do a better job as a community in doing quality control checks and tests and audits of our system, one thing we discovered is that in many places, there was a real lack of good reporting. So they were doing the audit, they were doing the quality control check, they were doing these things to ensure the security and accuracy of their election. But the material that was being put out to the public, we think could use a little help. So that was what led us to spend some time thinking about reporting. So let me just share my screen. There we go. So we're going to start with the basics. We know that some of you are going to drop off this webinar in a few minutes, so we want to get the important things out of the way. When you do put reports out, public-facing audit reports, we would encourage you to write those in plain language. We use a lot of jargon and acronyms in our community. And so if you feel like you do need to use some specific words, include definitions for those technical terms so that folks that are reading your report know what you're talking about. And at a minimum, encourage you to include the date and timeline for the audit. Often it doesn't happen on just one day. There may be different things that are happening in the build-up and after the audit. Let people know who conducted the audit, who was involved. What were the methods that you used for the audit? When we talk about specifically post-election audits of our tabulation equipment, we know that there are various methods used across the country to do that. Let the voters in your community know what your method looked like. What was your sample size? How many records did you review? How many ballots did you review? Depending on the type of audit that you're doing, it's really important to give that context. And then what were the findings, including any recommendations for improvements to procedures? And this is an area where we feel like we definitely have some room for improvement. I'll see a lot of tables and charts with good data about the number of records and the number of discrepancies, but often no narrative to understand more about those or what's being done, to make improvements in the future. We also know that there's some good messaging that we can use that can help improve confidence. And I'm really excited. Verified Voting is a nonprofit organization that supports election audits. And they've conducted some research. We're actually going to have them join us next week for a conversation. So if you want to hear more about their research, I encourage you to join our second audit workshop, talking to voters about audits. That'll be next Tuesday, September 24th. But here's some high-level takeaways from their report. Include messaging that indicates that audits are overseen by trained election officials who are sworn to impartiality. Ballots are audited by nonpartisan or bipartisan teams to ensure neither party has influence over the process. So if that's a practice in your jurisdiction, highlight that. Think about messaging that indicates that the audit process is transparent. Often it's open to the public, open to observers. Make sure that you let people know that in your report. And then let folks know that final audit results are reported and made available to the public so that they can know that it's done fairly. And again, that means you've got to actually be putting out that report to the public. But when you do, there are ways to message that that's being done in a way that can help build trust. Some of the other things is you're thinking either about your reports that you're building, or we really encourage you to work with your local media to help them build an understanding of the audits that you're doing and some of the findings. Some of the things you might want to answer or address is why was the audit conducted? What is it that the audit was trying to achieve? What standards was it measuring against, or what was it looking for? What errors was the audit trying to discover? Often we forget to tell voters, this is the thing that this audit does. Post-election, again, tabulation audits are a really good example of that audit doesn't do anything to help us understand voter eligibility, but it's an amazing way to ensure that the voting system was accurately programmed and tabulated ballots correctly. And then lastly, what evidence was produced as part of that audit that can provide accountability to voters? So we know that that's a lot. We know that creating reports can be a daunting task. We've built some templates. And so the next few minutes, I'm just going to give you a quick look at these templates. We'll drop some links in the chat. But we focus primarily on those tabulation audits that happen after the election. We've got 3 different treatments. They'll all look basically the same, but we've tried to make them as easy for you to customize to your own laws and practices as possible. So we focused on those of you doing risk limiting audits, those of you that audit a fixed percentage of ballots or precincts or tabulators. And then we know that there's a small part of you doing an automated audit where you're either rerunning all your ballots through another voting system or using Clear Ballot or some similar type of system to conduct an audit. So we hope we've covered kind of the majority. And I think the thing that I really love about this is we want to show that audit reports can be interesting. They can be visually interesting to look at and read. And again, this is, yeah, I got ahead of myself. Let's see. Risk limiting, fixed percentage, and automated. All right. There we go. So let's dive into this. We take this approach. We borrowed this from an organization we work closely with and admire so much, the Center for Civic Design, and they talk a lot about constructing material in a way that you can give people a bite, a snack, or a meal. We know that with a multi-page report, it's likely folks won't get through the first few pages. So we start with the bite. We want to give people some high-level information on that very first page and sort of by the numbers look at how many ballots were counted, how many ballots were audited, how many contests were audited, who was involved in the audit, and sort of a quick overview of the discrepancies or any other sort of relevant information, the sample size, that sort of thing. This is really just, I want a quick look at what happened. We also know that the process used in conducting the audit is important. And for those of you running elections, that often takes the form of election laws, so statute, administrative rules, standard operating procedures, in other words, pages of information. We want to think about boiling that down into really simple, easy to follow list that voters can look at and just get a basic understanding of what took place during the audit. Again, those report templates I mentioned, we've tried to customize this based on the type or the method of audit that you're using, but you get a good idea here of what that might look like. The other thing I should note is these audit template reports are, you'll hear me say this repeatedly, very customizable. We've included different icons you can swap out. If you don't like the ones we've used, you can change the colors, you can add your own logo. And we've included some instructions to help you do that. If you don't have a communications person in your office or somebody that's good at this, we've tried to coach you through it. And certainly you can always reach out to our communications resource desk, and they're happy to assist you if you are struggling to do any of that customization. Okay, so we got through the bite. Now we want to get to the snack. maybe I'm a reader and I want to know just a little bit more. Here's your opportunity to give me a little bit of an executive summary. What happened, where and when, who was part of the audit team, what were some of the highlights of the audit? And this is a place really you can call out the results, but in a very concise way. So, the audit, no discrepancies were discovered, or, whatever sort of the high level takeaways were. I'll also say the report format that in this template is in a PowerPoint presentation, so it's easy to move pages around. You may decide you want this executive summary up front. On the next page, we briefly describe what happened as part of the audit. Sometimes we think about the audit as like a single point in time, when really there are all of these different things that go into securing our elections, from our pre-election test until those audit results reports are sent to the Secretary of State's office or whoever you're reporting to. And so sort of helping voters understand the timeline involved around your audit can be helpful. It gives them some context. It also helps them see there are a lot of things that go into ensuring the accuracy of your election. Again, this next section of our report, we really want to think about plain language, even though we're getting into a little bit more of the details. We're starting to move into the meal portion. We may want to give a little bit more about our method in describing it, providing a table that's easy for people to understand the results. Again, which contests were audited and how many ballots and how many discrepancies were discovered. And it's really important to highlight or explain what those discrepancies are. I think we shy away from that, and we need to not be afraid of talking about that. This is really our opportunity to say, to acknowledge that there are opportunities for learning and for improvement. And it shows fidelity to the audit process by not just sort of sweeping discrepancies under the rug, but actually owning them and educating people about why they may have occurred. I will just say, in most cases, when we talk again about tabulation audits, those discrepancies have to do with something human happening, adjudication, typically, or pulling the wrong ballot. And so explain that rather than just let that discrepancy hang out there and leave people wondering, oh, what happened? We've also created a page for you to sort of highlight your key takeaways. What went well? What were some things that are good and exciting, and we want to really make sure people understand? And again, where did we see opportunities for improvement? I think too, this is so important when we do have an audit that doesn't have discrepancies. I've often talked to people that say, I don't think they're really auditing because every time it just says 100% match or no discrepancies. And actually, that's true. Election officials run really good elections. They do a lot of work to ensure that their equipment and things are functioning accurately. If that's the case, there's still an opportunity to share with the public something that you've learned. I know for me, doing audits and having an audit done regularly, even if we did not have discrepancies, we always came away thinking, I think we discovered something we could do better next time just to make the audit go more smoothly. This last few pages is for those hardcore readers that really want to understand maybe the policy behind your audit requirements, or any additional background information you want to give them. This is where you can really get into the weeds. In this case, we took an example from the risk limiting audit report sample, where we get a chance to really explain how an RLA works. But as you'll notice, we've saved this for the end. For most people, they're not as interested in that as just what is that you did an audit and what the outcome of the audit is. Finally, as I mentioned up front, it's really important to include a glossary for those acronyms or that other sort of jargon that we use, those words that are unique to election administration, like UACAVA or cast vote record, so that everybody has an understanding of what we're talking about. We also have some inserts and checklists. So we know that in some places, they're starting to do process audits of, in this case, we've got ballot management practices or the way mail ballots are validated. You need to tell people about that. I see that so often where election offices are like, we do this all the time. We're always checking for this thing. That's amazing. Find a way to share that with the public. And so these inserts or additional templates just give you a visual way to plug in that information to sort of showcase your process audits. In addition to the report template, we want to help you tell people about your report. So we have another toolkit that's on the website to help you talk about your report. It includes some sample press releases, things you can use on social media to sort of boost awareness of your audit and boost awareness that your report is out there and available. Because nothing's more disappointing than putting in a lot of time and effort into a report that then doesn't get a lot of visibility. So we need to find ways to boost that. And then finally, I'm going to just end. This is one other new template that we have. We created it, again, to showcase all of the many layers of pre-election, election, and post-election security practices that are in place, including your audit. And maybe another avenue, if you're thinking about, maybe you don't like our audit report, this may be something else that you can use to sort of showcase the work that you're doing. Okay, I'm going to stop there and pause. And Courtney and Brian, that was a lot of 15 minutes of me talking. So we've got some great things that you're going to show our audience, but I want to sort of set the stage a little bit for both of you. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the reports and the information that you share, but I think it'll be helpful for listeners to understand a little bit more about the audit practices in both of your states. As we know, anybody listening who's been to any of my audit presentations, there is no single state that conducts audits exactly the same. So it's great to hear how that happens in other places. So Courtney, tell us a little bit more about audit practices in South Carolina. Maybe give us a little flavor as to what is required, what maybe is optional. And I'd also love to hear, I know you do some quality reviews as well that aren't necessarily formal audits.
So in South Carolina, again, we're a fairly new division, been around for about 2 years. And we were required to, in state law, to conduct compliance audits. Which is a really broad term. I think most people would refer to them as procedural or process audits. But what we're doing when we do those types of audits is we're looking basically at any election-related topic that occurs at any point in time in the elections process. So it could be tied to voter registration, it could be tied to the lead up of the election, it could be an audit of something on election day, it could also be an audit that's occurring after an election. So we really have a lot of flexibility on what we can audit, which is why we're always learning a lot about elections. So those are our compliance audits. We also, as you mentioned, we do compliance reviews. Those we really try to reserve. They're a much quicker type of audit. It's not as full scale. And really, when we're doing these, we're looking in real time as to what is happening. So I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we looked at the use of seals on voting equipment during early voting. And you can only really check something like that in real time. And so those are the kind of quality reviews that we do for those types of things. We also have our post-election audits, like I believe most states do. We do have a few types. We have hand count audits that we're currently doing, which like that fixed percentage of precincts that we have our counties perform those. And then we also have a results verification, which is through a third-party vendor, checking the accuracy of the tabulation device.
Thank you, Courtney. You know, what I love about that is I often remind people when we think about like the fidelity of our financial institutions or the efficacy of our drugs or the quality of our food, all of these things rely on regular compliance audits and quality reviews. So I love that you guys are thinking about how do we apply this to elections. Brian, tell us about Utah. What are the audit practices there? I also need a refresher. And what's mandatory and what are you doing in your office that's maybe not mandatory?
Great. Yeah. So we have a number of different audits that are required within the state of Utah. One of them is a more recent requirement that was required legislatively this last year that requires the Office of Legislative Auditors to conduct a statewide audit of the election system. So that covers everything from voter registration. It covers processes, policies, procedures. And it covers accuracy to make sure that basically that we're carrying out the law as it's required. So that audit is done every even numbered year. So right now our auditors are busy doing that, and they'll have a report we anticipate sometime in October, we believe. So that's one of them. Another ongoing audit that we have is on a monthly basis. The Office of the Lieutenant Governor, who oversees elections for the state of Utah, they're required to do a voter registration audit in which they go into the records of each county and randomly select a certain number of registrations. They're looking to make sure proper documentation is there, that the voter registration status is correct, party affiliation, basically all of the information recorded with the voter matches the documents that we've received from the voter. Also making sure that we have a process within our system in which we're able to do an ID validation or an ID verification that matches the information we have in our voter registration system to the state driver license system. So it's just matching those records. So they go through that process on a monthly basis within our systems. Then we jump down to the county level. We have audits that we have to conduct in relation to every election. We are a primarily vote by mail state, and we rely on a signature verification to validate the identity of the voter when the ballot is returned. Prior to the separation of the ballot from the envelope, we're required to do a 1% audit of every group of ballots. So that has to be pulled out. It has to be reviewed by an individual that was not involved in the initial signature verification. So we'll provide that independence there. So that's one of the things that we do during the election process. And then, of course, we have the more traditional post-election audits. It's a fixed percentage, 1% of all ballots cast. We have to pull those out, and that audit has evolved over the years. We started doing those audits back in 2006, and it has evolved. In fact, they're working on just an update to our policy, which will require a hand count of those ballots that are selected, to not just validate the accuracy of the counting machines for each individual ballot, but to verify the accuracy of the tabulation, the summary of those results. All of our audits are required to be in sight of the public. The audits that we conduct here in our office, we have to publish those on our website, in our public information website, statewide information website, and invite public to come in. We want them to come in and watch that process. So those are some of the requirements. Some of the things that are not required. Some of the things that we do here in Davis County. When I kind of got more involved in the audit process a few years ago, we decided we wanted to enhance the independence of this. And so we decided to bring in citizen auditors. We replaced all of our permanent staff and we brought citizens from our community. They conducted the audit. They did the verification. Obviously, we were there to support and make sure that it was done properly, but we brought them in to do that. The other thing that we implemented is we brought in a member of our board of canvass. Here in our county, we have a county commission that serves as the board, the public body that certifies the result. And so we asked them to appoint a member of their group to come in and participate in that audit as well, just to create that separation, that additional level of independence. Other things that we're doing, we're going to be talking about this a little bit later, but how we share that information out that we're not necessarily required to do, but we put it out there because we like to share it and for those questions.
Wow, Brian, thank you so much. I feel like I need to go in and write an addendum now to our Exploring Audits guide that just gives an overview of all the audits that you guys are doing in Utah. I love that you mentioned this idea of independence, and I know, Courtney, that's just sort of a given, I think, in the audit community. But I love, sometimes we think, oh, it has to be this formal, I need to bring in an auditing firm, or I need to bring in the state. And, the idea of bringing in members of the public, we've seen that work in a lot of other states and jurisdictions where we can say, the canvassing board or members of the party or these individuals, poll workers, whoever it might be, but not the people that were responsible for doing the work. One thing I love about our audit report is we've given you a place to highlight that, and we've seen really great success in a couple of states that have done that to sort of share with the public. These are your neighbors that came in and did this review, so that's fantastic. Well, we do have some things to share. I have so many thoughts and questions now, but I want to, Courtney, we're going to turn back to you and give me just, hang on. Let's try this again. Okay. Does that look good to you?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll let you take it away.
Okay, well, this is a shameless plug. This is our sevotes.gov webpage. Our audit division has it's a subpage where this is kind of the first view. We highlight very briefly the different types of audits that we do. As I mentioned, we do the compliance audits, the compliance reviews, as well as the different types of post-election audits. Next slide. So as you move down the page, we give much more detail as to what we're talking about. I say post-election audits. These are also our election results audits. We're really describing in great detail how we make our selections for our precincts and our contests that need to be audited. We talk about which elections these apply to. We talk about the individuals that participate in these audits. So we provide a lot of upfront information on these audits that we do. Because if you go to the next slide, this is where we actually publish the reports themselves. So the reports just show the results, whereas the webpage kind of gives you a little more background information. So here we have it broken out by calendar year. It's basically an expandable page. And for each election and every set of audits that we do, we publish this information. One, I think it's a great thing, but two, it's because we're required to by law. Next slide. And then at the bottom of our webpage is where we post our compliance audits and our compliance reviews. Again, we include a little bit of information about what these are and how they're different from each other. These are a little bit different, though, than the actual post-election audits that we do. We write a lot more in the actual report. So this is kind of sparse right here. But if you see below that, you also see the expandable page by calendar year where we upload our reports, and they're just one click away for any user. Okay, next slide. And so if you were to click on one of our reports, we usually have a summary document as well as a full report. I do think some people like to read and get a lot of that background information, but sometimes 50 pages is a lot. So we also try to provide a summary, which is what we do for each of our audits. This is a 2-page summary that we did for one of our counties in South Carolina, Berkeley County. It's near the coast. And we tell people why we did the review, what was our objective, and then how many recommendations. And we really tried to, this was shrunk to 2 pages from 50 pages. So we really try to be very pointed in what we're putting out there, very clear, break it down into bite-sized chunks, as I was mentioned earlier, to try to give people a taste of what it is that we looked at and what it is that we found. Next slide. This is the back side of it. Here, I really like the back side because we have graphics in there. I love using graphics in my audit reports. I feel like graphics, pictures, say, 1,000 words can be spoken in a picture. I feel like you could communicate a lot more with graphics. And so we always try to plug those in where we can. So that's just kind of what we do with our summary for our really big reports. This is a compliance review that we did earlier this year. So this is a little more condensed, a little more to the point. This was something we audited in real time during our early voting period in February. But here we were looking at the use of seals on our voting equipment. And so the first page, we're really talking about what's that requirement in state law. Do any of our policies require that as well? And we really lay the foundation for why we're doing this audit up front. We also, again, I really love pictures, so we always try to include the pictures. We're talking about seals, and so we wanted to give the readers an understanding of the different types of seals they might see if they were to go out and look for these types of things when they're out voting. And then last page that we have here for the report is we want to show people. Again, I love a picture. We can show people exactly where these seals need to be placed. It was a lot easier to put this in a picture form than try to describe it with words. So I'm always defaulting to pictures. And then the last little bit was about the actual visit itself. They were unannounced visits, and everybody was really thrilled about that, but we like to see what's happening in real time. We don't want people to change their behaviors because they know the auditors are coming. So we really try to give an explanation for that before we actually go into the results. And then these are the results that we have. We have one for each of our 46 counties in South Carolina. We put the kind of detail that you need, which county it is, the early voting center that we visited, the date and time of the audit, and then the things that we looked at and whether or not, basically check marks. Did we see a seal there or did we not see a seal there? And so for each county, you have just, a quick slice. You can jump to your county and you can see how well you did, and then you can get in and get out. So if you're really interested, you can see how the state did as a whole as well. And so that's kind of the little snapshot. We have one version that's, an abbreviated version for a long report. And then we have this much more shorter truncated version for these kind of quality reviews that we do.
Courtney, that is awesome. We're going to go to Brian, but I want to just pause and say, I love that you've got these quick summaries. I love the visuals. I love this document that we're looking at right now, where it's just really easy to go in and know without a lot of words, this is what the audit board looked at. This is what they found. I think that's just fantastic. And the other thing, just so I don't forget when we talk later, I love that you create a timeline on your website. And again, I think there are different ways to do that, but really helping people see that this is systematic, it's happening on a regular basis is so important. Brian, we're going to jump to you. So take it away.
Excellent. Yeah. So wanted to share just a little bit about some of the things that we've done with our website. We've taken an approach of kind of this concept that if questions are left unanswered, it leaves a void of information. And for our citizens, if there's a void, they will fill it with something. They may make it up themselves, or they may find something on social media. And so we wanted to really take an approach of providing as much information that we thought would be helpful in a voter understanding the election process as possible on our website, to provide that transparency, to provide that openness. So one of the things you see here on our very front page, now this isn't necessarily audit related, but it is kind of shining the light on the election process. We have our ballot statistic. So right there across the top of our webpage, as ballots start coming in and we're processing those, these numbers are updated every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday during the election process, from when ballots are delivered to when we certify our election. And so an individual can log onto our website and see very quickly and easily, where we are in the process. Each of these, going back to what Jennifer talked about, is making sure that we're describing things or providing kind of definitions of what we're talking about. On our website, if you click on the question mark here, it will give you a brief description of what each of those categories are. So it's just a very simple way to provide some information out there to help people understand things. We can go to the next slide. The next thing that we've done, and this has kind of been an ongoing process as we continue to strive to find ways to improve. We went through a process a number of years ago and gathered all of our election records back to 1896. So that's when Utah became a state. And we published that out on our website with all of the reports, all of the statistical samplings that we could capture up to that time. We're actually working on an additional piece to this project, go back to 1856, when Utah was still a territory, and capture all of the territorial election results. We figured that's probably not adding transparency, but it is something kind of unique and fun for people to look at. But the part that we're really focused on here is adding some transparency, and we've added this new portion under our election results where we have our Canvas report. So if we can go to the next slide. Within our Canvas report, it includes all of our audits that we conduct as well. We're required to do that pre-election test and audit report, and kind of verify what it is that we've looked at, how many different ballots were reviewed, when it was accomplished. Also within this, we have our audit certification. So that's our post-election audit, giving again our sample size, what we're looking at, the races that were audited. We're sitting through this webinar. I found some great ideas that I want to implement now to add a little bit more description to what we're doing. You'll notice that on that one down on the bottom right-hand side, we have to do a reconciliation as well. How many ballots were cast and how many vote histories. And if any discrepancies are there, we have to explain it. So this was our most recent primary election. We did have one discrepancy. So we have to be very open and transparent what it was or what did we find. So we have that included there. We can go to the next slide. This is another report that's included in our Canvas report. It's our Canvas statistics. So this keeps track of, the turnout, how many active registered voters we had, how many ballots were mailed, how many were received. Really just kind of breaks down all of the details of what took place in that election, to where if a citizen wanted to get more details really into the wonderful statistics that we all love as election officials, they can get that as well. Next slide. The other thing that we want to be open and honest about is ballots that are not counted. Any reason why the ballots are not counted, and so this is also included in our Canvas report, identifying the types of ballots and the reasons why they may not have been counted. We summarize all of this, and how we make this publicly available is, of course, it's on our website, but we also include it in our presentation to our board of Canvas when we're certifying the election results. So we walk through this and explain that where it can become part of the public record, which is our permanent record within our county. So people can always go back to that. We think it's really important to answer those questions and to fill that void of information for our citizens. Jennifer, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Sorry, Brian. There we go. Okay. Technology, it's hard some days still. Thank you so much for that. Let me just say I heard in other jurisdictions once talk about the different ballot stages as buckets of ballots. But I love that you've got this just totally linear model that people can watch those ballots literally move through from received till the end, and those explanations. I think when we talk about transparency and trust, that's so important, especially in a mail ballot state where there are a lot of questions sometimes about what happens from those 2 points. So kudos to you on that. And holy cow, 55? Was that right?
1856.
56.
When our county was first formed.
You might have the new record when you get done of audit results reports that are available. That's really fantastic. Well, you guys, this was just awesome. I feel like we could end here and our viewers would have so many great ideas for things that they can do moving forward. But I do want to talk just a little bit. First, I'm just curious what kind of feedback you've gotten from either the public or some of your stakeholders about the audit work that you're doing and about the reports that you put out. And you can go in any order.
Go ahead.
We do get a little feedback. We audit in South Carolina. I'm at the state level, so we're auditing our counties. And the most feedback we get is from them. And I think what they really are concerned about is if we find something, how do they explain that? And so we have a good discussion with them. And then after we publish that report, we don't hear from them because they're able to then turn around if they get questions from the press, they're able to kind of explain what has happened and what's the route to correcting any issues that might have been found. We do reach out to the press here in South Carolina and let them know that we've published a report. They often do news stories about that for us. We have groups in South Carolina that reach out to us and let us know that they're interested in seeing audits in certain areas. The outcome of our audits when they, an audit's been published for a period of time and they reach out and say, we're just so glad that you've done this. We've seen a change. So it's not always positive, but we've had a lot of good positive feedback, which is great because an audit is intended to improve. It's intended to make us better. So we're grateful for that.
Thanks. Ryan, anything you want to add?
I wish I could tell the group that we've just been inundated by positive comments and positive feedback from our citizens. They're just clamoring and pounding down our door to tell us how wonderful and great we are. But we all know that that's not true. Usually as humans, we love to focus on the negative. But here's what we have seen that is a positive. We regularly have interaction with citizens who come with legitimate questions and concerns. I'm not talking about people who are, quote unquote, election deniers or on either side of the political spectrum, but just general people who have questions. Those are the people that these audits make a difference to. Those are the people that when they come in and ask questions and say, well, how do you know for sure that our ballots were counted correctly? And we walk them through that process. That's the person that when they walk out of my office, they say, thank you for what you did. Thank you for sharing this information with me. I feel much better about what we're doing here in the county. And I think that's the focus on at least the public aspect of why we do audits. We could talk about the internal reasons why we do audits all the time, but for me, that's the biggest difference that we've had is those individual one-on-one conversations with people as they come in.
Brian, I want to just stay with you on that thought for just a minute. I was going to ask you to talk about whether it was worth the work to sort of do all of this. I think you just answered that. I'd maybe like to reverse that and see if you could just take a minute to share with us what does it take from an administrative perspective in terms of your time, staff time, to do these audits, to put these reports together that you do. I know, Courtney, you're in a little bit different position because you get to focus on this full time, but what does that look like? And then, if you have any other thoughts about, is it worth it? Because I know I've been asked that a lot by election administrators. This seems like a lot of work. Is it going to be worth the effort?
Audits are a lot of work. We shouldn't sugarcoat that. It takes work. I was at a conference just last week, and they asked the question, why is it that we believe in what we do? And I think anybody who really gets into this career field, they learn very quickly why it is they do what they do. It's because they believe in this concept, this idea of free and fair elections. They understand the importance of the role that we have. And so audits take work. They take time, they take planning, they take preparation. And so dedicate the time. But you ask the question, is it worth it? Audits do a couple of things for us. Probably the most important is that audits confirm, and they confirm where our strengths are, and they help us identify where any weaknesses are. That allows us to have that continual improvement internally. None of us like it when somebody points out that we made a mistake. Audits help us catch those mistakes ourselves to where we can say, hey, we found this weakness and we're working to fix it. And this is how we're going to do it. So in the end, is it worth it? Yes, because it helps us improve our processes. In the end, is it beneficial? Because yes, because it does help us communicate with our citizens. And in the end, we can go to sleep at night knowing that we've done our very best and we've verified that what we have done is done correctly.
That's great, Brian.
I could kind of just second everything that Brian has said, and just add one other little tidbit, why I really like the audits that we do, especially the ones that are incredibly lengthy. It's an opportunity for us to be able to clarify things that are misinformation about elections. So even if it doesn't lead to a process improvement or a recommendation, we're able to put information out there about what is the correct process. What should this really look like when you're going to vote or you're watching the absentee accounting process. So we're able to put information out there so that our citizens or residents in South Carolina are more educated about the election process.
Courtney, I love that. And putting myself back in my old role as an election administrator, I would have loved to have had somebody at the state level, independent from my office, make that sort of declaration or provide that information. I wonder, we'd said just a few minutes ago how audits sometimes have this negative connotation, right? We think about tax audits or other audits often end up in news stories with not great headlines. How do we flip that? And maybe, Courtney, if you could put a plug in now thinking about like at the state level, how would you encourage other states, or would you encourage other states to create a position like yours in an office like yours? What's the benefit?
Like I just said, I really like the opportunity to be able to put the correct information out there. I know that I'm a human, just like the people that I'm auditing are human, and we all make mistakes. We can all do better, and it's an opportunity for anyone to kind of step back. You have a group freely doing this for you, stepping back, looking at what your processes are and looking at what you're supposed to do and giving you recommendations on how to either follow that process or improve it or make it more efficient. So it is unfortunate that audit has such a negative connotation, but all of my staff here, we view it as a process improvement. It's never been a gotcha for my team. This is how do we make it better if we're not doing it right?
I love that. Well, we have one audience question. This is for Courtney and Brian. So the question is, at this time, are RLAs being considered in your states? How do you all feel about RLAs and the perceived benefits or drawbacks of them? And I will let either of you answer or not answer if you've got some thoughts there.
RLAs are in South Carolina a likely possibility in 2025. I know we have recently upgraded our equipment, which will allow us to do the imprinting that we need to do on the ballots in order to perform that. So I'm a big fan of RLAs, of everything that I've read about them. And so I think the hardest thing for me is trying to figure out a way to communicate with the public because, man, your eyes roll into the back of your head when you hear statistics. So really trying to be transparent about it, but when you're transparent, there's more questions. And so trying to figure out a way to communicate that and also knowing that we would be shifting from one type of audit to another and how to bridge that gap. So that's kind of the drawback and the reality that I'm facing as wanting to implement them in South Carolina.
Thank you, Brian.
For Utah, there's no specific talk about RLAs in Utah. However, there is an ongoing review of our audit processes, and so RLAs would be one of many considerations to look at and weigh out the pros and cons of that and any other audit procedures that are out there. So we look forward to that here in the next little while and getting some reports from that, figuring out which direction the state wants to go.
That's great to hear. I'll just remind everybody, we've got a number of reports on the Elections Group website, including our Exploring Audits, part 1, where we do talk a little bit about risk limiting audits as well as the other types and delve a little bit into some of those pros and cons. And Courtney, I agree, the communication part, which is so important. People aren't going to trust it if they don't understand it, is definitely a challenge. We also have some other reports specific to RLAs. If folks are interested, they could take a look at those. We need to wrap up and close now. You've all, I think, gave some excellent points, especially right here at the end, in sort of supporting audits and reports. I'm curious, just after this conversation and thinking more about reporting, is there anything that, and I'm putting you on the spot because I know we didn't talk about this, but is there anything you might do differently moving forward with the reports that you're putting together as part of the audit work that you're involved with?
I really like that little, I forget how you phrased it. Is it a bite? Yes, I don't do the bites, but I really like the bites, and I'm starting to think, how can I incorporate that in? Because I know that just from my my professional background and reporting to legislators, they had about 30 seconds to read anything, and I knew they were not going to read 50 pages. They're probably not likely to read that 2-page that I put together either. So I really like this concept of a snack and trying to synthesize that information while at the same time still providing enough information so there's an understanding of what we've done.
Yeah, thanks. As somebody who likes to write volumes about audits, I had to learn the hard way that most of the time people want that by the numbers or that quick bite-sized look. So thanks, appreciate hearing that.
I think my perspective, I believe providing a narrative is a really important aspect of it on your records. We provide a narrative in our public presentation of the audit report, but we have not considered including that in the documentation. And so I took that little nugget of ideas from this presentation to incorporate into our documentation of the audit, that I think would be very beneficial.
Oh, that's fantastic. And sometimes we don't do it because it's, well, writing is hard, takes time. And, we worry when we're putting something out publicly that each word is going to be analyzed. Just remind viewers that we have a team of expert writers who are more than happy to help or take a look at something and give you some feedback. If we could be of help there, we're always happy to do that. So that's awesome. Well, Courtney, Brian, oh my goodness, this has been a delightful conversation. I've learned so much. I'm really excited, probably after the election, but excited to dig in a little more to the audits that are happening in both your states and your work. And hope that you have the rest of the year goes well for you if we don't get to talk. And thank you again for sharing your work, sharing your expertise with us.